Well, I'm going to kind of keep with our little theme here of Swiss Army knife. Okay? Anybody here have one at home? Wow, quite a few of you do. There are some that have like as many as like 20-some tools in them. It's amazing. Some of them have like a saw, and compass, a pen, all sorts of things. As we already talked about, the Swiss Army knife is famous for the many different tools in one. And when I look at our reading this morning from the book of Hebrews, I kind of think of a Swiss Army knife. I think of it because when you look at that chapter, at Hebrews chapter 13, it kind of looks like there's a lot of random statements, a lot of random thoughts. Okay, we're talking about hospitality in one verse, and in another we're talking about marriage, and in another one we're talking about stewardship and giving, and in another one we're talking about remembering those who are in prison. There's just all these kind of different random thoughts, all kind of in one chapter. And at first it kind of seems like, well, where's the sense? Where is this going? But you might be surprised to know that as multifaceted as Hebrews chapter 13 is, there really is a common theme that holds it all together. Let me give you a clue. If Hebrews chapter 11 is mainly about faith, and Hebrews chapter 12 is mainly about hope, what do you think Hebrews chapter 13 then is mainly about?
Love.
Love. Exactly. Gold star for you, okay? Faith, hope, and love, okay? All right, upon these three things are the greatest of all, right? And the greatest of them all is love. So, of course, chapter 13, the end chapter of the book of Hebrews, is going to be then about love. So you're like, all right, so how does this all fit together? Well, notice how verse 1 in Hebrews chapter 13 begins with this. Keep on loving each other. So everything that the writer is going to talk about in the rest of chapter 13 here are basically expressions of brotherly or sisterly love. Okay? And that's why it seems to be so kind of random. Okay? But he's talking about how this is love, this is love, and this is love, and this is love. This is all what it looks like. So we're going to kind of break some of those different tools down as we go through the chapter right now. Okay? With me? Mm-hmm. All right. So, when we read first in verse 1, keep on loving each other, we need to understand that the love that is described here is a brotherly kind of love, or a friendship kind of love. It is where we see the word phileo in Greek. Okay? And that's, of course, as you know, where we get the word for Philadelphia, or the brotherly city of love. So all of these different comments in this chapter, from hospitality to money to respecting leaders, flows from this one source, a brotherly love, a sisterly love, the kind of love that is a genuine like, a sincere care for one another in community and those who share it. This is the kind of love we're talking about, okay? So, turn to someone next to you and say, I love you. Okay, this is what we're talking about here. Okay? We're supposed to be showing this kind of love. Okay? We're talking about agape love here. All right, we're talking about a brotherly love. All right, all right. So we're going to now look at kind of what this looks like as we flip open all of these different tools. All right, let's look at verse 2 now. Do not forget to entertain strangers, for by doing so, some people have entertained angels without knowing it. Now, in the Old Testament, 3 people hosted angels in their company without knowing it. Abraham, Gideon, and Manoah, who was the father of Samson. Now, when we think of this, showing hospitality, do not forget to show hospitality, do not forget to show kindness to strangers. Oftentimes, we kind of think of, well, having a big dinner party where a nice meal is cooked and smooth jazz plays in the background. And afterwards, everyone retires to the patio to chit-chat over coffee. That's lovely, certainly. But often we feel like hospitality, showing kindness to people or entertaining strangers, has to be about somehow putting out your best china or somehow having the neat home all made up. And that's not true. Again, that's all lovely, but if you have simply a table and 2 chairs, or if you simply invite someone to sit with you and talk on a bench, you can practice hospitality, Okay? Let's get away from the stereotype that to have the gift of hospitality means you have to somehow put on a big dinner spread. All right? That's a great gift, and that's wonderful, but this is the kind of hospitality in which we're just simply saying, can you make room to show kindness and to love and listen to people? Mm-hmm. Everyone can do that, right? Mm-hmm. This is what we are being told of here. Opening ourselves to share with others is a sign of love for our fellow man and woman. And in a world where increasingly people feel disconnected, like they really don't have real friends, and they really don't know who to talk to, Christians should be willing to lend an ear to love and listen to those we meet. When we do that, we practice hospitality. Okay? And you never know. When you do this, when you take time to listen to someone who comes through your day, or someone who maybe you just met down the street, when you take time to listen to them and get to know them and love them, yes, indeed, you may be blessed by a word from God that maybe you too needed to hear. The word angel means messenger from God. So whether or not the person who you are entertaining is an actual angel from heaven doesn't really matter. That is true. There have been times in which, yes, literally, there have been angels that have come to be known with us. But oftentimes, in the midst of your conversation with someone, they might say something of God that quickens your spirit or helps you in some way. And so therefore, that person has been a messenger. They have given you a word that maybe you needed to also hear. That has happened to me many times, in which just by simply talking with someone, they have said something in their story, or they have said something in their particular comment that's kind of quickened my spirit, and I've been like, ooh, God, you're reminding me of that. Okay? So God has used that person to give me a message. They've been an angel, if you will. Okay? Make sense?
Yes.
So hospitality are one of those great gifts and tools that we all need to be able to do and show as an expression of love.
Amen.
Whoever the new person is, whether it's a visitor, whether it's the person who just moved into the neighborhood, whether it's the new guy in the office, or the new girl in school, or the family who has just come to our land, whoever that stranger is, I feel like what the writer of Hebrews is saying when he writes this is he's actually reminding us of our Jewish heritage. You might be like, well, how is that so? Well, because he's writing to kind of Jewish Christians here. He's reminding them, remember how you were once a stranger in a strange land? Remember how you came from Egypt? And when you were in that strange land, in that strange place, how you needed to be cared for? So too, now you need to be caring for the people who come into your path. Specifically, Leviticus chapter 19, verse 34 says, "The stranger who resides with you shall be to you as the native among you, and you shall love him as yourself. For you were once aliens in the land of Egypt. I am the Lord your God." So hospitality is not just simply a nice thing to do, it's also a reminder of our heritage. How we were once, spiritually speaking, even if you're not an ethnic Jew, were once a stranger in a strange land. And so now, too, you need to show that kindness to others. I identify with this very much because for 2.5 years, I was a Peace Corps volunteer in Nepal. And I lived there and in very many ways experienced the kindness and the hospitality of several families while I was over there whenever I came into their villages for work. I was never denied respect with a bed and a meal if I needed it. And though certainly it would have never have been anything up to quote-unquote American standards, it was a lot for them. And I've never forgotten that. Which is one of the reasons why I still have a heart today for those who come from other lands when they visit us. Back in seminary, there was a time when a student from Uganda came to study with us. The seminary office contacted me to help him transition to campus and to get his bearings. They contacted me because they knew my background and that I could relate with him on some things he'd be feeling and going through, moving from one country to another. So this is a very, I think, big command that God gives us as his people, that hospitality is important and needs to be extended to those who are visitors or strangers in our area, whether they've actually literally come from another land or whether it's just simply the new person who moved into town. It's very important. Let's look at another facet of our Swiss Army knife of brotherly love. Verse 3. Remember those in prison as if you were their fellow prisoners, and those who are mistreated as if you yourselves were suffering. Now remember that early Christians were the minority, and they were often targeted for their strange beliefs and practices. Many were put in prison, and as you know, many were often killed. So this letter to the Hebrews is reminding them that you are all connected. And so if one of our body, if one of our community has been put into prison, don't forget them. Don't just simply pray for them, but identify with them and their struggles. And this is where I'm challenged when I read this. When I read this earlier this week, it was that particular part of it that really stood out to me. As if you yourselves were suffering. So that means we have to, with those who are suffering, whatever it is, whether it's prison or any other mistreatment, we have to try to identify with them in their struggles. And when there is an injustice that has maybe put them there or given them that feeling, we have to work to remedy it. Where there might be a sense of isolation or shame or forgottenness, there needs to be encouragement. The challenge here is to move from sympathy to empathy. This is what the author of the book of Hebrews is challenging us in what love looks like. It's not just simply coming up to someone and saying, I'm so sorry that happened. Okay. That's great. Sympathy is nice. But empathy is not well, I can't empathize because I haven't had that particular experience. I mean, I've never been in prison. Okay, so I can't simply say, well, yeah, I know how you're feeling. Right? No, but I have felt isolated at times before. There have been times when I have felt forgotten. There have been times when I have felt like nobody cared. See, it's asking you to get in touch with that feeling. And to identify sympathy is seeing somebody fall into a dark hole and saying, oh man, I'm so sorry. You okay? Empathy is climbing down into the hole with them. Yeah. Now, it's not taking it on you. Okay? Some people feel like that means now you have to somehow take their suffering on you, or you have to somehow substitute yourself in their place. No. That's Jesus' job. He's the one who bears our sufferings. He's the one who identifies with us, and really we are to point and give our burdens to. But you can at least be with them, walk with them, share with them in that experience, and help them go to Jesus. You see the difference? I've heard some people wrongly pray, oh Lord, give me that thing instead. Don't let them suffer. Oh no, don't be doing that. Don't put yourself in their place. You give it to Jesus. Help them give it to Jesus as well. I know a gentleman who was fighting cancer. He's been fighting it for almost a year now. Recently, he's been in the hospital for well over a month. Tests, treatments, surgeries. He's still there today. He's mostly been fed through tubes over this last month. His wife is exhausted. Conversation, of course, naturally tends to focus on what has the doctor said now? Or any new instructions? Or what's the latest prognosis? It's almost like one's entire identity has been shifted to the cancer. And when I visit him every week, I take communion. So that when the doctors allow me, I take a drop of communion wine and I place it on his tongue. That's all he can have. Nonetheless, I still find the conversation awkward. I don't want to just rehash medical stuff. It's what everybody talks about. And I don't want to just try to paint a silver lining over the cloud that he may be feeling. I just want to relate with him as a person, as a human. Maybe watch TV with him. He had the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air on the other day when I went to go see him in the hospital. Okay. If it's tiring for him to talk, since he hasn't rested a lot with the constant in and out of people, then I just stay briefly. And that's okay. Truthfully, sometimes I don't even know what to say. Because I really am not really sure I know how he feels. I can only wonder what it must be like to face one's mortality sooner than expected. To wonder, as I'm sure he must, will I ever eat steak again? One day he had Jell-O on his table side, and that Jell-O might as well have been filet mignon. It was the first food he had had in weeks. He actually joked with me. He said, "Don't touch my Jell-O. I saw you going for it, Father Mike." See, it's just trying to relate with him and just being human. Okay? It's hard. And sometimes love just has to say, "I don't know what to say, but I'm just glad you told me so I can be with you." Whatever hole we might be in at a time, what makes it better is not always a word that you say, it's the connection. Just knowing that, again, you're not alone. So if we're all brothers and sisters connected by love, then it's important for us to remember each other and allow our connections to identify with each other in our joys and in our sorrows. And this is why the writer of Hebrews reminds us, even those in prison, remember them as if you yourself were their fellow prisoner. And those who are mistreated, identify with them as if you yourself were suffering. It's a big challenge. But that's what brotherly love starts to look like. Next one. Verse 4. Marriage should be honored by all, and the marriage bed kept pure. For God will judge the adulterer and all the sexually immoral. Now at first you might think, after hearing this verse, wait a minute here, I thought we were talking about friendship love. This is a different love, right? This is like agape love. And that would be a good question to ask. Yes, agape love is the unconditional love of God that so often is talked about and relates to marriage as well. But what is being addressed here is the honoring of marriage, both by those who are married and by those who are not. Obviously, marriage is to be honored by the couple. There should not be cheating, and there should not be any sleeping around. But what is less obvious is that marriage has and still is often seen as a fallacy, a man-made institution, a ball and chain, or your life is now over. You see how often in our culture now, marriage is not honored. These are the descriptions that we have of it. How many books, how many movies are there that promise the fling that will get the spark back? Or the adventurous rendezvous with a seductive man or woman to feel alive again? It plays into this notion that marriage is not worth it. That's just somehow a piece of paper, and that all that matters is what I feel. Cohabitation rates in the U.S. are rising, and have been for a while. We tend to treat people like cars. I'll take him or her for a spin to see if I want to buy it. Young people say, well, it's a way of seeing if I'm ready for marriage. But then you're left with an emptiness of waiting for commitment and stability. And of course, living together then becomes a greater temptation to have sex. So then what happens when you become pregnant? Now hurry up and marry? Or have the child but deny the child a stable family, a as partners move in and out, or abort the child because the baby is an inconvenience. Our culture has lost an honoring of marriage, and we see the fallout all the time. So this is why we should support marriage if someone is called to it. We should encourage couples in their marriage to reflect God. And we should promote the sanctity of marriage as that which God has ordained, not as something that simply we came up with as a legal contract. And if someone is called to the single life, wonderful. Let him or her honor marriage as a holy relationship and not look down on it. There have been times in history in which marriage was kind of looked at as like, oh, you're not as strong as I am. Couldn't hold yourself, huh? So you went ahead and got married. Almost more like chastity was made to be like something superior than marriage. And that's not true. Both have an equal and holy calling. If one is called to a single life, that should be honored, and that should be blessed, and that should be upheld. But if one is called to marriage, then that likewise should be honored and upheld as a holy relationship. One is not better than another. They're just different. And here, we're just simply encouraged to honor marriage, because that is the way we love each other. If something hurtful or tragic happens in the marriages, that is hard, and that is painful. And likewise, those wounds need to be bound and healed. We need to love people who have been hurt through broken relationships. What I'm sad for in our culture nowadays is that because we have seen so many hurt relationships due to broken marriages, is that now we have a generation, if not two, that basically want to stay away from marriage as a whole. Because they feel like, man, just why even bother? Too much pain involved. That's why we see cohabitation rates soaring. People are now too scared to get married because of all the hurts that have happened. So no judgment, but it does need to be honored. It does need to be upheld. And people, no matter where they are in their relationships, need to be loved. And loved back to a place of wholeness, not looked down upon. The last tool I'm going to look at today is verse 5. Keep your lives free from the love of money and be content with what you have, because God has said, never will I leave you, never will I forsake you. Man, sex and money. Man, this is a popular passage today. Wow. Sometimes it's hard, guys, being a preacher, but you got to talk to them, you know, you got to deal with it. It's there. If verse 4 was about being content in whatever holy state of relationship you're in, then verse 5 is about being content in your financial state. It's interesting that the verse, never will I leave you, never will I forsake you, that is so oftentimes quoted by Christians and in prayer. When you look at the context of it, it's related to dollars. Because the truth of the matter is, giving, stewardship, being financially generous to help those in need, is about saying, I know God will take care of me. I know He will not leave me. I know He will not forsake me. Therefore, I can't afford to be generous. I can't afford to give in those in need, because I know God will not leave me or forsake me. You see how the two go together? So our stewardship, our giving, is related to our faith. If I really believe that God will not forsake me and God will never leave me, then I should be willing to write some more checks or put some more cash in the plate. Or for those who are in need, give to them, even if it's, well, I've already given at the office or I've already tithed at church. It challenges us. Again, this is another expression of love. We cannot compartmentalize our lives and say, well, I will be generous with my time, or I will be generous with the things I can do, but I can't afford to be generous with my money. Things are all integrated in our lives holistically. We can't compartmentalize things. That's why I've had to learn this myself. That's why when we talk about giving, when we talk about stewardship, we're really talking about it as a spiritual discipline. We're not talking about it simply because we want your dollars, come on. It's actually a way of helping you grow closer to Jesus and increase in your faith, because you're exercising that muscle of, okay, I will trust you, God. You won't leave me. You won't forsake me. You know my needs. You know the very hairs on my head. And so therefore, I will give. It's a statement of faith. I oftentimes tell the story of, again, back in seminary. I didn't have a job when I first got to school. I didn't have a car. I only had a bicycle. And literally, I showed up at the doorstep of the seminary office with a trunk, my bicycle, and a couple of bags. I had just gotten out of the Peace Corps. That was pretty much all I had to my name as far as material possessions. I didn't know where I was going to stay. I didn't know even really how I was going to make do through things. I just knew God had called me to go. So I went. And the housing coordinator that I spoke with at the seminary knew my situation, and thankfully a student had practiced hospitality and allowed me to stay with them for a couple of weeks while I got my feet on the ground. And it just so happened that a door opened up, but maybe 3 blocks up the hill, where an elderly lady who was living alone, and her family was living another state away, wanted someone to be with her to make sure that she would at least have someone to talk to in the evenings or to check up on her. And they had, there in Ambridge, Pennsylvania, that's where it was. It was a 2-story house. This elderly lady lived on the bottom, and so upstairs there were some rooms, a bathroom, and even a kitchen. And the family met with me, interviewed me, and said, we would love it if you would stay with us. We'll give it to you free of charge. No rent. I would still be responsible for electricity and for gas, but I could stay there free of charge in return for being a companion, being a friend to this widow. It was an amazing relationship. Her name was Mary, and I had an amazing chance to get to know her and talk with her. God provided in that way. Now, you still might be asking, okay, well, Michael, you still had bills to pay. Well, yeah, I did, so I had to eat, okay? And I had no problem riding my bicycle down to the dollar store, doing my grocery shopping, riding back up to the house with grocery bags on either side of the handlebars to eat. I was able to get a small little job, part-time, at the school library for a few hours a week, just enough to kind of help paying a very simple electric bill. Because again, I didn't have a lot of appliances. So my electric bills were only running like maybe $30 a month, okay? Gas was another story in the winter, but long story short, never did I go hungry, never did I go out on the street, never was I without. God always provided for me. So much so that he challenged me that he will always provide for me, that even with that small job, working a few hours a week at the school library, even on that, I remember hearing a sermon on tithing and saying, well, surely you won't expect me to tithe. I mean, gosh. But I was like, well, no. All income needs to be tithed on. And so I did. At the weekly chapel service that we had, I would give. Even if it was $5, I gave $5, which was a lot for me at that time. But again, never went hungry. God always provided. Relationships were built. People knew what was going on. I found food sometimes in the freezer of the kitchen at the seminary, and the ladies would say, hey, if you're staying late at the library desk, if you want, before you get on your shift, come on over and just take these leftovers and eat these. Didn't have to go as many trips to the dollar store. Yay! Okay? Just time after time after time, God provided. I could tell you so many different stories. God will not leave us. He will not forsake us. So your giving, your stewardship is a way of showing this kind of faith. And so I challenge you here today and throughout the entire year. Will you give sacrificially as a way of showing that you believe? Even if you are already tithing, can you give extra? You know our church financial situation. Can you go without that popcorn at the movie theater? Can you eat one less time out at Outback? There's so many ways that we can split the pie to help out.
Amen.
We could keep going, but for time's sake, and because, well, you probably already had enough sex and money and everything else, oh my gosh, we're going to stop with those tools in our Swiss Army knife and end with the challenge. Keep on loving each other as brothers and sisters, both those you know and those that you have yet to know, all for the glory of God.